In our headlines on this Wednesday afternoon, November 1st, here in South Korea. The latest air raid by the Israel Defense Forces reportedly killed a senior Hamas commander who helped organize the October 7th massacre in southern Israel, which has since led to a massive ground mission into Gaza. Meanwhile, Korea's exports regained tangible ground, expanding on year for the first time in 13 months, with a 5.1% increase in October compared to the same month last year on the back of auto exports. And an alliance of 40 nations, including South Korea, is poised to put in place a pledge against payoffs to cybercriminals as part of broader efforts to root out illicit fundraising activities by countries like North Korea. Israel claims it has eliminated a top Hamas commander who helped orchestrate the October 7th assault. But the Palestinian militant group insists the Israeli airstrike on the refugee camp killed civilians instead. Our Min-jae has the latest.
An Israeli strike on a refugee camp in Jabalia in Gaza on Tuesday has killed dozens and injured hundreds more. The Israeli military says the airstrike was part of a successful operation to kill Hamas's top commander, Ibrahim Biari. However, the militant group denied that one of its leaders was at the camp and has instead accused Israel of a heinous crime against safe civilians, children, and women. Initial reports from Gaza's health ministry says at least 50 people were killed in the strike. Meanwhile, according to the General Authority for Crossings and Borders in Gaza, Egypt is set to receive 81 Gazans who have been severely wounded via the Rafah border crossing. According to the AFP, citing an Egyptian medical official, medical teams in Egypt will be at the Rafah crossing to examine the cases coming from Gaza and determine the hospitals they will be sent to. Gaza's health ministry says more than 8,500 Palestinians have been killed since the armed conflict began on October 7th. Hamas says it will release some foreign hostages in the coming days, but did not elaborate further. A spokesman for Hamas's armed wing, Qassam Brigades, said Tuesday that they have informed intermediaries that they will be releasing the foreign hostages soon. More than 230 people, including Israeli soldiers, civilians, and foreigners from several countries, are being held by the militant group. And amid the fierce attacks by Israel, the spokesperson also warned that Hamas would turn Gaza into a graveyard and a quagmire for Israeli forces. Min-jae, Arirang News.
More than 9,900 civilians have lost their lives in Ukraine since the start of Russian invasion on February 24th last year. Addressing the UN Security Council on Tuesday, Director Ramesh Rajasingham of the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs also highlighted the dire consequences of Russia's destruction of civilian infrastructure and vulnerable groups that have virtually no access to electricity, water and telecommunication ahead of this winter. He called for greater efforts to better protect civilians. U.S. President Joe Biden and his Chinese counterpart Xi Jinping are looking ahead to constructive dialogue during their planned summit on the margins of the APAC meeting in San Francisco this month, that is. According to the White House earlier on Tuesday, the talks are expected to be tough but tailored to mutual interests and concerns. The planned high-profile exchange between the two leaders follows China's top diplomat Wang Yi's recent visit to Washington. Meanwhile, a coalition of countries, including Korea, will seal a deal pledging not to pay off cyber criminals. Our Kim Jong-sil explains.
40 countries, including South Korea and the U.S., plan to sign a pledge never to pay ransoms to cyber criminals. They're part of a U.S.-led alliance that will also work toward eliminating the hackers' funding mechanisms. The White House announced a plan on Tuesday local time. The International Counter-Ransomware Initiative, a two-day event ending on November 1st, includes representatives from 48 countries, the EU, and Interpol. This is the third annual event that is being hosted by the U.S., which, according to the White House, is the country that has been hit hardest by cybercrime. It aims to eradicate the criminals' funding by sharing information, including the ransom payment accounts. The initiative comes as FBI Director Christopher Wray emphasized the risks of cyber attacks at Tuesday's U.S. Senate Committee on Homeland Security and Government Affairs. Wray said in the last few years, countries like China, North Korea, and Russia, quote, use cyber operations to target U.S. research. He also said cyber attacks by China, Russia, and Iran are becoming more aggressive and more capable than ever before. The FBI director said he's most worried that these adversaries focus on, quote, compromising U.S. critical infrastructure, especially during a crisis. In ransomware attacks, hackers hack into an organization's systems to steal information or encrypt data and demand ransom in exchange for unlocking it. Kim Jung-sil, Arirang News.
North Korea has closed its embassy in Spain. A diplomatic document released by the Communist Party of the Peoples of Spain on Wednesday announced the closure, adding that North Korea's embassy in Italy will be in charge of matters involving Spain from now on. No reason for the closure has been shared. This latest development follows similar shutdowns of Pyongyang's diplomatic missions in Africa, including those in Uganda and Angola. Pundits here believe the closures may indicate financial hardships to maintain overseas missions amid global sanctions. President Yoon Suk-yeol has reiterated the significance of fiscal soundness, adding that spending cuts will stabilize prices and ultimately help the working class. Speaking at an emergency economic town hall meeting here in Seoul earlier on this Wednesday, the president also spoke of the challenge of trimming expenditure and reallocating funds amid resistance in what he called an era of political excess. That being said, he pledged not to place priority on political gains. Some 60 citizens from diverse backgrounds attended the town hall gathering to share their thoughts on the economy. And on the trade front, Korea's exports in October marked an on-year rebound for the first time in 13 months amid greater shipments of electric vehicles to the U.S. market. Our Park Ko-nu has the latest numbers.
South Korea's exports for the month of October jumped 5.1% on year, reaching a new high for 2023. According to the Trade Ministry on Wednesday, this was the first time in 13 months that South Korea saw an increase in exports compared to the year before. The country's trade balance in October was in the black for the fifth consecutive month, with the export volume exceeding $55 billion and imports hovering under the $54 billion line for a surplus of some $1.6 billion. Robust exports were mainly attributed to the performance of core export items, including automobiles, general machinery, ships, and displays, which have all seen a jump for several consecutive months. The higher cost of petroleum products also pushed outbound shipments up for the first time in 8 months. Semiconductors, one of South Korea's largest export goods, saw a recovery last month as well, after a poor performance in Q1. By region, 6 out of 9 of Korea's major outbound shipping markets saw an increase in October. In particular, exports to the U.S. were highest for any October, mainly backed by electric vehicle exports. Total exports to the U.S. came to $10.1 billion, exceeding the $10 billion mark for the second consecutive month. Exports to China remained above $10 billion for the third straight month, while shipments to the ASEAN region were not just a new high in 2023, but also for any October on record. As for imports last month, due to higher prices for energy sources such as gas and coal, the figure shrank by over 9% year-on-year. Meanwhile, South Korea's trade minister stressed that recent export data is evidence of recovery, even in times of global uncertainty, including high interest rates and oil prices. He added that the government would do its very best to maintain this trend until the end of the year. Park Ko-nu, Arirang News.
In other news, the Biden administration has imposed financial restrictions on Myanmar's state-owned oil company. According to the U.S. Treasury Department on Tuesday, loans and investments by Americans to the Myanmar oil and gas enterprise will be restricted, but it will not block the oil company from America's banking system altogether. The Myanmar oil and gas enterprise is reportedly the junta's main source of foreign revenue. Back in February, the European Union took similar restrictive financial measures. Now, separately, 3 institutions and 5 individuals with links to Myanmar's military have been sanctioned. Seoul's Food and Drug Safety Ministry has secured a remarkable vote of confidence from the World Health Organization. The Korean ministry has been recognized as one of the first 3 entities of the WHO-listed authorities. The other 2 are the Swiss Agency for Therapeutic Products and Singapore's Health Sciences Authority. According to the global health body, the recognition marks milestone achievements for South Korea, Switzerland and Singapore, given their excellent regulatory practices and promotion of safe, effective and quality medical products. Halloween this year here in Seoul was a relatively quiet affair amid the tragic loss last year. Our Shin Se-byuk was out and about.
Hongdae, one of the hottest and trendiest nightlife areas in Seoul, used to be filled with excitement and people with costumes for Halloween. And now, 1 year after the deadly Halloween crowd crush that took the lives of 159 people in Itaewon, things have changed. Halloween 2023 is much calmer and quieter than other previous years.
Before the tragic accident last year, my friends used to suggest going out to places like Itaewon or Hongdae for Halloween. But now the whole let's go out vibe has really died down. I'm not too keen on heading out either.
I see fewer people wearing Halloween costumes this year. It's also less hustle and bustle overall.
However, despite the solemn mood, the Halloween spirit was found in some places. Decorations like ghosts and pumpkins were scattered around, and there were some people wearing costumes. In fact, according to the Mapogu District Office, during the Halloween peak weekend, which fell from October 27th to 29th this year, approximately 260,000 people visited Hongdae over the 3 days from Friday to Sunday. It's a 50% increase in visitors compared to other usual weekends. To prevent accidents due to population density, the government and local authorities have made extra preparations. From October 27th through November 1st, the Seoul Metropolitan Government is keeping a close eye on 16 areas across 12 districts, including popular spots like Itaewon, Hongdae, and Gangnam. Seoul City and 25 local districts, together with safety-related agencies like the police and fire department, jointly monitor crowd density to ensure everyone's safety using AI-powered crowd management systems. Medical facilities as well as medics and ambulances were also on standby. Halloween is over, but the government is bracing for upcoming year-end festivities nationwide. With large-scale year-end events set to take place nationwide, the government has vowed to implement on-site crowd management systems at 100 locations across the country by the end of the year. Shin Se-byuk, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, on the football field, Korean defender Min-jae has been named AFC Asian International Player of the Year. At the ceremony in Doha on Tuesday, the Asian Football Confederation commended his contribution to Italy's Napoli last season with 16 clean sheets, 2 goals and 2 assists in 33 matches, as the Blues won their first league title in 33 years. He was also part of the Napoli team that secured its best ever Champions League finish, reaching the quarter-finals. Currently playing for Germany's FC Bayern Munich, Kim is just the 2nd Korean player after Son Heung-min to win this title. He was also the only Asian player to make the shortlist of the 2023 Men's Ballon d'Or Award. Korea has has become a significant Indo-Pacific partner for Europe in recent times. Now, this is according to a scholar of global affairs who believes Korea is capable of contributing broadly to tackling universal challenges. Our senior correspondent Oh Soo-young met up with him.
South Korea has grown as an important Indo-Pacific partner for European countries and a force for multilateral cooperation amid war and tensions across the world. That's according to Ramon Pacheco Pardo, a professor of King's College London who recently co-authored Korea, A New History of South and North. Speaking to Arirang News, Pacheco Pardo said the perception of South Korea has changed over the past year and a half, particularly among European governments, which are increasing their engagement in the Indo-Pacific to secure peace and development, where 60% of the world's maritime trade passes through. He said Seoul's surge of soft and material power in recent years has shown its growing capacity to contribute to resolving global challenges, looking beyond its own security interests on the Korean peninsula.
It's not only the demand for Korea to do more, but they believe that Korea has the economic resources, technological resources, diplomatic resources, and military resources, along with the soft power, to contribute more, to contribute to the provision of global goods, aid, for example, to developing countries. You also see, for example, when it comes to supply chains, diversification, or de-risking, as some people call it, away from China. Well,
the expert noted that Seoul was invited to the G7 and NATO summits for 2 straight years since 2023, with President Yoon pushing to bolster global solidarity and institutions to deter threats from North Korea, ensure peace and the rule of law in regional waters, stabilize supply chains, and support the green transition and global development. In particular, Seoul's trilateral cooperation with Washington and Tokyo, set out at the Camp David summit in August, is expected to become the driving force for building peace and prosperity in the Indo-Pacific.
I think it is necessary for Korea, Japan, and the US to make sure that they start implementing at least some of the deliverables from the Camp David statement as soon as possible, whether it's a dialogue, education program, whether it is the joint development of deterrence capabilities that they were talking about, for example, in the area of economic security.
But beyond trilateral efforts, multilateralism is crucial to keeping the momentum going, beyond political forces of change that may come as a result of key elections next year, particularly the US presidential race. Here, Pacheco Pardo said Seoul can play a crucial role in solidifying the network of like-minded partners, especially in maritime cooperation and high-tech areas like semiconductors, artificial intelligence, cybersecurity and space.
In terms of making this a success, I think it is necessary also to engage other partners. Of course, Korea, Japan and the US can do a lot together, but many of the areas they focus on, for example, economic security, for example, they do focus on the development of new technologies. You really need other partners. You need Europe, you need Canada, you need Australia, you need Taiwan as well.
Having held 142 summits with 93 countries so far, Yoon is set to engage with a number of European countries until the year end, in bilateral summits with the leaders of Ireland, the UK and the Netherlands. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. In the Middle East, Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen issued a video statement on Tuesday claiming ballistic missiles and armed drone attacks against Israel. Houthi military spokesperson Brigadier Yahya Saree said it was the third such operation since the October 7th Hamas attack and that they plan to carry out more strikes until the Israeli aggression stops. Israeli military officials on the same day said the newly operational Arrow missile defense system had shot down a surface-to-surface missile they believed to have been launched by Houthis aimed at the port city of Eilat. They also said fighter jets had successfully intercepted drones, with the Times of Israel reporting that no intrusion into Israeli territory was detected. 25 days into the Israel-Hamas war, concerns are high over the regional conflict amid speculation that Iran could become more actively involved. In Europe, heiress to the Spanish throne, one of the last remaining monarchies in Europe, has turned 18. On her 18th birthday on Tuesday, Spanish Crown Princess Leonor de Borbon-Ortiz swore allegiance to her country's constitution, laying the foundation for her eventual succession as the Queen of Spain. During the televised ceremony in the lower house of Parliament, Leonor recited the same oath that her father, King Felipe VI, did when he turned 18 in 1986, pledging to faithfully carry out her duties and to keep and uphold the Constitution and the laws and respect the rights of citizens. Should Princess Leonor become the next queen, she'll be Spain's first queen since Queen Isabella II, who reigned from 1833 to 1868. In the US, a 58-year-old Maryland man who became the second person in the world to receive a transplanted heart from a pig has died. Lawrence Fassett, who was dying from heart failure and ineligible for a conventional heart transplant, received a genetically modified pig heart transplant surgery on September 20th. He survived for nearly 6 weeks after the highly experimental surgery, just short of the 2 months that the world's first pig heart transplant patient, David Bennett, lived following the surgery the year before. Fassett's cause of death was due to the body's rejection of the organ, while the previous patient, Bennett, passed away from a pig virus found inside the organ. Saudi Arabia is set to host the men's 2034 World Cup after being named as the only bidder for the competition. According to FIFA President Gianni Infantino on Tuesday, Saudi Arabia was the only interested party after Australia pulled out ahead of the FIFA deadline on the same day. Football Australia said it would now focus on preparing to hold the Women's Asian Cup in 2026 and the Club World Cup in 2029. The US, Mexico and Canada will host the World Cup in 2026, while Morocco, Portugal and Spain remain the single bid for the 2030 edition. A FIFA Congress in late 2024 will confirm hosting duties for the 2030 and 2034 World Cups. Kim Ji-young, Arirang News.
Good afternoon. We are entering into November, but the temperature feels like it's going backwards. Morning temperatures were nearly 11 degrees Celsius higher than season norms, and highs will also soar to 23 degrees Celsius this afternoon here in Seoul. And it's going to be even warmer tomorrow with an expected high of 25 degrees. Perhaps shirts and shorts will be just fine. Northern parts of the country, however, will see some spotty showers through tonight with 5 to 30 millimeters of rain expected, along with thunder and lightning during the day. Air quality could become bad in some of the western regions, including here in Seoul. Meanwhile, southern parts of the country are in for very warm and promising weather under plenty of sunshine today. Daegu sees highs of 25 degrees. Gyeongju, Jeju will be warmer today. Mother Nature will give us extra warmth for the next couple of days. Then rain this weekend will bring a late autumn chill to the country next week. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
That ends our afternoon newscast for this Wednesday, but we have our panel session coming up right after this break, so do stay with us.
Hello everyone, I'm Savitri Panaboke, Ambassador of Sri Lanka to the Republic of Korea. For people like me who is very interested to learn more about Korea, Arirang TV is a valuable source of information. Arirang TV is like a bridge that connects Korea to the rest of the world. I have learned so much about Korea's history, culture and people through Arirang. It is also a leading channel for news and diplomacy and current affairs, and I look forward to learning more about Korea through Arirang TV. Resonating with the world, Arirang.
Busan, Korea is already reaching the entire world, like ocean waves that travel far and wide. It's Busan, the perfect World Expo city, transforming our world, navigating toward a better future.
What would you say in Korean in this exact situation? Find out in Paycheck, conversing in Korean.
Contour the world, simply contour. India, the United Kingdom, New Zealand. Woo!
I'm excited. You excited?
Of course.
Yeah.
Music, start.
Children's laughter, hope, dream. K-animation belongs in them. Interesting and valuable story that transcends between everyday life and dream. Surprising spectacle where imagination becomes real. An array of subjects catering from infants to adolescents. For our story to reach all corners of the world. K-animation makes healthy laughter for children.
Leaders of the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation are poised to meet in San Francisco this month amid efforts to build a broader, resilient economy, even as the world faces armed conflict in Ukraine and in Gaza. So what issues look to dominate this year's APAC? What are the prospects of a bilateral summit between China and the US on the sidelines of the APAC? And what is the significance of the APAC for South Korea, both in terms of economy and security? Welcome to Issues and Insiders. Diplomacy looks to stay on track in November as well, with a number of high-profile summits in the cards. For more on this, I have Professor Min-jae from the Korean National Diplomatic Academy here in the studio. Professor Min, it's been a while. Welcome back.
Yeah, nice to meet you.
I also have Professor Kim In-han from Itaewon Women's University here with us. Professor Kim, welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having me today.
Right, Professor Min, leaders of the APEC are poised to meet this month in San Francisco. First of all, broadly speaking, Professor, what issues look to dominate these upcoming talks?
Yes, the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation, APEC, is an economic forum for the 21 member states of the Asia-Pacific region. And it was established in 1989, and it facilitates trade and investment, economic growth, and regional cooperation. Specifically, its mission statement shows that member states are agreed to support free and open trade and investment, and promote and accelerate regional economic integration, and encourage economic and technical cooperation. And in 2023, this year, U.S. is chairing the APEC, and San Francisco will be the city to host the APEC meetings this month. And the main topics of this year's the meetings include regional economic issues, mainly like sustainability, digitalization, and the women's economic empowerment, trade facilitation, energy security, food security, and health. And along with the regional economic issues, it is also likely that ongoing important global issues like Israel-Hamas war, the war in the Ukraine, and the climate change will be also discussed at the meetings. And during the APEC, it is that there will be a bilateral summit meeting between U.S. and China. And considering that U.S.-China strategic competition has intensified and the international community is suffering from the ongoing global issues like the two wars and climate change, so the whole world is paying much attention to what topics the two countries will talk about at the meetings, and more importantly, whether the two countries will be able to narrow down the gaps and make a progress for the important global issues.
Right, and before we delve further into the upcoming summit between President Biden and President Xi Jinping, Professor Kim, perhaps you'd like to tell us a bit more about the possible issues that may dominate the talks this time around at the APAC, that is.
So I agree with Professor Min in many ways. So three issues will dominate the APAC summit meeting next week, in 10 days. So the issues I can pinpoint, that is one, U.S.-China rivalry, and the second is economic trade issues, and the third is Israel-Hamas conflict. Especially let me start from the U.S.-China rivalry. So member states will call for, it is time to ease tension. It has been like for 5 years and 6 years. And the adverse impact, especially on global economy, that's huge. And the member states in Southeast Asia, they don't want to be forced to pick one side. It's the tradition of the diplomacy. So they will say something about it, and about the trade issue. So we should understand that there's a gap between expectation from member states, especially Southeast Asian states and Korea, versus the U.S. So what the Southeast Asian countries, most member states want from APAC, that is expanding trade opportunities, and the primary target for their trade, that is of course the United States. It is because the U.S. is calling for the member states to reduce the ties and relations with China. So they need to find some alternative market, and the U.S. is one of them. But is the U.S. ready to grant access to the member countries for larger opportunities for trade? It's doubtful. The thing is, think about IPF, kind of Indo-Pacific Economic, the framework for prosperity. So it's more like kind of the mechanism devising the supply chain in U.S. favor rather than giving the trade opportunities. So the trade issues will be kind of big one in the middle of the summit and in the different summits by many political leaders. But the U.S. at this moment, given the kind of political dysfunction and the Congress, so there won't be much the U.S. can offer or promise at this moment. So there will be kind of talk, but I think the discussion will be lost in the middle. At the same time, Professor Min tapped on the kind of the Israel and Hamas conflict, but we need to pay attention to the diversity of the membership inside APAC. So we have Western powers like the United States, Canada, Australia. They are traditionally in favor of Israel. They have supported Israel. But other countries like the Malaysia and Indonesia, they are kind of Muslim countries, and they have already made strong statements condemning Israel. At the same time, they will they will demand the Western powers, like especially the United States, to something to rein in kind of violence or stop violence in Gaza. So probably the U.S. and other members kind of want to avoid the issue in the middle, but it will come up. So the three issues, kind of the world will watch what kind of the outcome will come out from the APEC. Well, the thing is, those issues very contentious, and so I doubt that kind of meaningful or kind of productive kind of meeting from this summit.
Right. Well, the APAC looks like it has a daunting task ahead in front of it. In the meantime, Professor Min, to bring the dialogue more to South Korea's focus, then, what do you suppose is the importance of APAC for South Korea, both in terms of course, the economy as well as security?
Yes, basically the APEC is a very important international meeting for South Korea's economy and security. As an open trade country, South Korea needed to improve its trade partnerships with the major regional countries. So actively participating in APEC has been important for South Korean economy. And South Korea has played a critical role in the various processes and discussions of APEC. For example, the adoption of the APEC Seoul Declaration in 1991 is considered as an important step for the building the institutional foundation of the institution or the meeting. And currently, APEC is trying to achieve sustainable and inclusive growth that lowers the barrier, hindering all the people in the region from enjoying the benefit of the economic growth. And it is also trying to encourage them to actively participate in the economic activities. And South Korea is actively participating in the process by taking the lead in the discussions on the issues such as the digital economy, connectivity, and inclusion. Meanwhile, considering that APEC is a place where leaders in the Asia-Pacific region gather together regularly, annually, so APEC offers a great opportunity to South Korea that it can receive support from the member states about its security policy, like its policy toward North Korea. So we can see that APEC has been a very important place and meeting for South Korean economy and security.
Right, and keeping in mind what Professor Min has just said, Professor Kim, what could South Korea do to make most of this latest APEC meeting in San Francisco?
So the APEC constitutes the most important corners of the global economy. So it sets a stage for the member states to expand cooperation in important political and economic issues. These days, given the context of the U.S. and China rivalry, APEC's importance has been elevated. First, because U.S. and China are vying for greater economic, political, and military influence over the region. And second, because all other states discuss and devise their own strategy to deal with adversities great power rivalry has created so far. So in that regard, it is very important for President Yoon to be engaged actively and proactively with member states of APEC to diversify Korea's trade market, and particularly because China China factor. So Korea has already experienced China translating a high degree of economic interdependence into a weapon for coercion. So Beijing's multiple retaliations after South Korea's decision to deploy THAAD in 2016, that's a great example. So Seoul is constantly exposed to China's economic coercion, and China is geographically very close neighbor, and Beijing has long been Seoul's largest trade partner. So, and these days, Seoul has made it clear that it stands with the United States. It is kind of faithful ally of the United States, sharing not just strategic interest, but also political values. So Seoul's pivot to Washington has made China, Beijing, very uncomfortable. So depending on where the rivalry goes between the US and China, another economic coercion from Beijing may come anytime. So this is what Seoul should be prepared. So that said, APEC offers a great venue to explore economic cooperation and diversify the trade markets. So particularly Asian countries, ASEAN countries are important, and Korea has found an alternative market in South Asia when confronted with the economic pressure from Beijing few years ago. So President Yoon will have to convince partner countries in Southeast Asia that Seoul's engagement with ASEAN countries will be continued, will be stronger and consistent. So Seoul needs to ensure the ASEAN countries that Seoul is a player in the area, not bystander.
Right. And beyond national interests, Professor Kim, as we mentioned earlier, US President Joe Biden and Chinese President Xi Jinping are poised to meet on the sidelines of the APEC Summit. Now, pundits are hoping that this particular summit between these two superpowers will show that ties between Beijing and Washington are stable, if not improving. What are your hopes?
Well, personally, I strongly hope that the upcoming bilateral summit between the two countries at the APEC will be the turning point that can significantly improve the relationship between the two countries. But unfortunately, the reality tells a very different story from my hope. Most experts, including myself, do not expect that the two countries will improve their relations significantly at the APEC Summit. Because it's mainly because they have very contrasting opinions on the major issues such as advanced technologies, global supply chains, the security on Taiwan Strait and South China Sea, and other things. And these topics consist of both countries' vital interests, and neither country is willing to give in their interest in any of them. So I think that they will just exchange their opinions about them at the meeting and just to say goodbye. So few compromise will be made there. Meanwhile, both countries seems to agree that they need to manage their relationships to prevent them from confronting extreme military situations like the serious military engagements and escalation to a full-scale war around the Taiwan Strait or the South China Sea. So I think that there is a high probability that the two countries will agree to establish a military hotline between them. And I think that that will be the major achievement for the summit meeting. That should be it. But last but not least, they will also talk about the major global issues such as Israel-Hamas war, and the war in Ukraine, and climate change, and other things. So I hope that they will agree to take more roles to resolve these important issues, although they have a little bit contrasting the point of views about them.
Right. And Professor Kim, what are your prospects with regard to the planned summit between these two leaders? Do you suppose the summit itself will perhaps put to rest, some rest that is, of the broader uncertainty over global stability?
So, yes, a summit, should it occur, then the summit will offer the U.S. and China a moment to reboot their relations. But here's kind of interesting thing. 3 days ago, when the White House announced there will be or kind of can be kind of summit meeting in San Francisco. So it's kind of the statement is very interesting. So White House says Biden, members of his national security team, and Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi had an agreement in principle for the summit in San Francisco. And Chinese government also keeps a suspension. This is kind of interesting. This is what they said. The two sides agreed to work together to achieve a meeting of the two heads of state in San Francisco. It sounds like the meeting is not set yet. But let's say that, well, but I heard that already Chinese delegations made a reservation for hotel rooms and everything. So we assume that Xi Jinping will be there. But still, the details are not yet known. I mean, it will be sideline meeting or it will be standalone meeting. So depending on the format for the meeting, so the quality of the discussion will be very different. So this is one thing we need to keep in mind. But anyway, we live in the world where the U.S.-China rivalry continued for the past 5 years, and especially this year, the relations. So we saw the relation went free fall. So a good example was Canadians flyover of a spy balloon over the mainland of the United States, and later on, the U.S. fighter jets took off and shoot it down. So I think that's a symbol of where the U.S.-China relations stand at this moment. But so the relations are very strained at this moment. However, it is important to note that Washington and Beijing have been trying to repair ties for months. So when we dial back to last summer, we saw that high-ranking officials, including Yellen, Secretary of the Treasury, she visited Beijing with other high-ranking officials. And then this fall, the U.S. political leaders, including bipartisan delegation of the U.S. senators, led by the Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, they visited Beijing. And what about California Governor Newsom? He also visited Beijing. And it is interesting that Xi Jinping, he greeted those people. And it is very interesting to see that according to the traditional Chinese diplomatic protocol, Xi Jinping was not supposed to be there, but he was there, greeted people. So it's he met people. So it's a sign that China is also interested in relaxing, easing tension between the U.S. and China. So recent developments are positive, but I don't want to be overly optimistic at this moment because still Beijing and Washington are very divided in many issues, as Professor Min already mentioned. So Ukraine thing is a thorny issue, and Taiwan is another one. And what about Israel and Hamas? And recently South China Sea issues. So there are many things to cover. And when they have a meeting, they will be busy talking about many different things.
Right, busy to say the least then. Professor Min, also this particular month, that is November, President Yoon will be traveling to the UK to mark 140 years of diplomatic relations between Korea and the UK. What can you tell us about Korea's general ties with the United Kingdom?
Yes, basically, the presidential office announced that President Yoon will make the state visit to the UK during this month. And it also said that this upcoming visit to the UK is significant because, as you mentioned, it marks the 140th anniversary of the establishment of diplomatic relations between the two countries, the South Korea and the UK. And the UK is one of the main actors and has been South Korea's important economic partner in Europe. Specifically, the bilateral trade between the two countries shows that they exchange the products like in 2019, electric vehicles, passenger cars, other automobiles, part of aircraft, and platinum and medicament, like medical supplies. They exchanged those important economic products. In addition, they also they have been important trade the investment partners. For example, in 2019, South Korea's investment in the UK was over $18 billion, while the UK's investment in South Korea was about $21 billion. And South Korea is currently trying to enhance its cooperation with the UK in supply chains, nuclear energy, and renewable energy. So, on the security side, the UK is one of the major NATO member states, And it also has lots of interests in actively engaging in the Indo-Pacific the region. So enhancing security cooperation with the United Kingdom will be very beneficial for South Korea.
Right, indeed. And Professor Kim, in what other areas do you suppose can Korea and the UK perhaps further seek to enhance their bilateral ties?
So I would like to point out first that this invitation, the state visit to London, it is an invitation by King Charles rather than the Prime Minister. So it will be more kind of iconic and symbolic rather than substantial. That's kind of bottom line. But the thing is, I think this event and this invitation is important because South Korea is recognized as an important country among fellow democracies around the world. I think that's kind of the most important meaning of the visit to London. And well, the thing is, President Yoon, during his visit to Washington, D.C. in April, he was a rock star. He's kind of singing the song of the American Pie was viral over the internet. So he won internet, he became a star there. But we wouldn't expect such kind of diplomatic event at this time because this is kind of Buckingham Palace, not the White House. According to some British sources, an article like Telegraph, they said that it is possible a string orchestra will be playing in the scene, in the backdrop, not a musical band. So we won't see such drama at the end of this month. But the possible area for cooperation between the UK and Korea, I think that is kind of maintaining the partnership in guarding existing international order. So President Yoon Suk-yeol has promised that South Korea will play a larger role in international politics, and global pivot state epitomizes his vision. And he has pledged to stand with the fellow democracies. And that said, UK is a key player in the existing international order, and it is a big player in the camp of liberal democracy. So in the meeting, by meeting King Charles and having discussion about kind of international politics, they will confirm that both countries, England and Korea, they are key stakeholders in the existing international order and play a responsible role in keeping the order stable and creating environment for the world to be more based on kind of rule-based. I think that's what we see. And another point I would like to make is kind of the interest in North Korean nuclear issue in Europe is kind of declining because they are preoccupied with the immediate crisis, Ukraine war. So I would say President Yoon would have a chance to say that ask for continued support from the UK to resolve the nuclear crisis, North Korea's nuclear violation with the NPT and the nuclear challenge.
Right, of course, reiterate the importance of focusing also on North Korea's potential threats then. All right, well, I'm afraid that's all the time we have today. Professor Kim, thank you so much for your time. And Professor Min, as always, thank you very much for your insights.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Right, well, that brings us to the end of this edition of Issues and Insiders. Thank you for watching.
제주도에 처음에 놀러 갔을 때 새롭게 단장했다고 이야기를 나와봤는데
할게요. 스트릿 사진 현장이었는데 혼자서 좋은 건축을
한국인들만의 마음들
같이 갈래요?